Jenkins says. Um, but yeah, I'm gonna take this time to just completely dedicate to the tier list here, and then I'm gonna probably queue down, get something to eat, whatever. Maybe even go to sleep altogether. Who knows? In any case, yeah. So I just basically showcased what Dragoon's capable of, and there's the reason why it should be S tier, right? So hopefully that answers any questions regarding Dragoon. Now, next on the list is Ninja. So Ninja is actually S tier as well. Given the fact that, so let me pull this down for a minute, show you what I mean. I don't know if I have ninja weapons on me. I do, okay. I need to equip the Jobstone. So Ninja says, I have great utility, amazing utility, probably the best in the entire game utility. I have, what is it? Damage increase with Mug. Stealth that allows me to assassinate for free, and this thing called Bunshin, which basically deals double damage with any of your mudras. Asterisk. By that I mean, you see I'm doing double shurikens, that's because of the Bunshin. Your mudras are Huton, which creates barrier and increases skill action speed, whatever, kind of like PvE. You have this thing, the shurikens, which does burst damage of 16k. You have your fire, which is a dot, going back to somebody's question earlier about a dot comp, it's right here, and a stun. So you have all this utility as Ninja, right? Like, beautiful utility. Let me cancel target dummy here. But the cherry on top, the main selling point of Ninja is that it has the this thing called Saiton, or what I like to call Deathlink. The status effect is called Deathlink. Execute anybody below 50% easy, and then after you get that kill, onto the next target minus 50%, and so on and so forth. And it just creates this snowball effect that really just makes or breaks a match, sometimes outright, you know, when it comes to like overtime and stuff like that. So Ninja, in summary, is the one job that's, I would say, the opposite of the easy to learn, hard to master. It's hard to learn, but once you do learn how to play Ninja, beautiful in the right hands, and it just does so much, right? So for any aspiring Ninja players, feel free to look into Ninja, see what it's capable of. Like, you're gonna have a great time on Ninja, right? So that's why in my tier list here, going back on the tier list, Ninja's S tier. So where would I put Sam? Sam is like now the next thing I'd put as A tier, just because, okay, let me explain why. So if I pull up a Sam weapon, wherever that may be, let's just use this for example. Samurai says, okay, my burst, this is the first downside. Let me start with the cons to Samurai, right? The cons to Samurai are, your burst is Midare, right? But your Midare also says I get a free Purify, kind of like Scholar's Purify negation, but for only 3 seconds. So you're basically saying, I'm gonna turn on my Midare before I engage, so I don't get caught by anything. For 3 seconds I have immunity, so that way I can guarantee my Midare. The next thing Sam has is this double thing, which, as you can see, is one of the also cons or downsides. You kind of want to use it only purely for single target, right? If you use it on more than one target, you just get a shield that is based on the damage you deal. And oftentimes you're not going to really get that opportunity to get a single target hit in, and you know, like, that's basically all where your damage comes from. Not gonna lie, that's all Samurai has in terms of burst. I kid you not, because now Samurai has somewhat utility, right? It has a root with so whenever you dash, by the way, you see how your combo changes into one of these? You have a root with this ice thing. Oh, well, I should probably not do that again. Okay, so this orange thing, or yellow-ish thing, just becomes only a damage dealer. And then you have a heal. I think the heal is probably the best part about Samurai, because it gives you some survivability, some sustain. If you can find a group of 5, you basically get a recoup's worth of heal for taking that risk. But last but not least, Sam's main selling point is in its LB, where if you combo Cheetan, they're mentioned earlier when we were commentating about not touching the stove. This is what he's talking about. If you touch a samurai with Cheetan up and they have samurai LB ready, consider yourself dead, because it's the one shot. It's Omayomo Shinderu for you, because yeah. But the problem is, okay, so the reason why Sam is A tier now, A is the things I just mentioned, and B, the main thing with the LB, you're never going to get that opportunity. If a team is really paying attention, okay, two things will happen. One, the enemy team will mark to ignore you, not for toxicity reasons, but mostly because they know if they see your LB coming up, they're gonna most likely not attack you to not give you that opportunity to hit. Now, there might be some people who aren't paying attention or aren't suspecting of that, and in that case, that's where you win, but 9 times out of 10, it's really hard to get any sort of value out of Sam LB. And 9 times out of 10 as well, you're only gonna secure 1 kill with it anyway. I do remember Season 1, where Sam just got multi-kills after multi-kills, because people didn't know the mechanic behind Sam. But nowadays, people have wisened up, people know what it does, and it's really not shining as it once did. It kind of needs a buff, if I'm being honest with you. And it's not seen much in Light Party, it's not seen much in solo queue. So ultimately, that's why if we go back to the tier list here, it's A tier. It's just could be better, could be worse, but ultimately it's kind of strong, right? At some point, something's got to give, and that time comes very rarely when people hit you with your Cheetan up. But the next thing on the list here is Reaper. So old me would say Reaper is like B tier, almost even C tier. 2023 Lelouch says Reaper is like maybe S tier. Okay, if this tier list had an A+ category, I'd say Reaper is A+. Otherwise, we're gonna go off the assumption or the rule that a plus implies that it can move on to the next tier, which is S tier. And in this case, I think Reaper can be S tier in some cases. And especially in this meta, and in this season with Clocktown. Here's why. So, if I pull up my handy dandy
another one
sites here. Thank you for the follow. I hope you're enjoying your time here. So, and the explanation in the tier list. So, Reaper says, okay, I'm going to do 3 things. One, you have this thing called Plentiful Harvest that says basically you can use it earlier to generate your LB. Reaper is the only, or one of the few jobs that can generate LB the fastest in the entire game. Next to White Mage, next to, let me see the list here. Okay, so Reaper, White Mage, maybe Gunbreaker can fit into that category, and Black Mage. Right, I think that those would be my top 4 quickest LB generators, but I think Reaper just beats everybody in that regard. And the reason why I emphasize or highlight this the most is because what does Reaper LB do? It turns off guard, fears people, meaning they walk away from you, and this is huge in the event of something like overtime where you need some sort of way to get people off the crystals so that you can secure your win, right? So that's another. And then after you go into your after you activate Reaper LB, you go into like a Reaper stance where your 1-2-3 combo completely changes. Your 1 is like increased damage, your 3 is a root, or in my case 3 from my perspective, right? My hotbar. Your slow becomes a root, and if you activate your LB again, it becomes into this huge AoE called Kamino, or Kamino, however you pronounce it. Yeah, Kamino. And yeah, that essentially secures the kill sometimes outright, because by that time you've already dealt so much damage, and your target has no guard, probably so you see what I'm saying? Like, Reaper has just so much going for it, And I didn't even mention Death Warrant here. Death Warrant is like the Reaper equivalent to a Machinist's Wildfire, right? If you put Death Warrant on somebody, expect to deal as much damage as you can within the time frame, which in this case is 7 seconds. Because afterwards they're going to just take completely unnegated raw damage added up to whatever the difference is, 50% of compiled damage it says here. So even if that target is in guard and you dealt say like 50k damage, they're going to just take 25k for free, right? And that's huge. Not to mention that Reaper has a shield that increases damage dealt when it's broken, I think. Or no, you get a regen, a passive heal, I think. No, just a flat heal after it's broken, but it damages increase. Like, Reaper's just super strong right now. Before, like I said, I would rate this job like a B tier maybe at worst. But I'm seeing a lot of use of it now in C9, because you want a guard break in C9. You can use it in Volcano if you time it right with the map mechanic for Volcano, which is like the bombs. And then cherry on top, when you can pull this off, is Clocktown. When Yojimbo is on people, and like on checkpoint and stuff like that, and it's the Yojimbo that insta kills, Reaper LB, they're dead. Like, what can they do, right? So that's why Reaper, if we go back to tier list here, S tier. Next on the list is Bard. So I like to run the joke that Bard is B tier, B for Bard. And if I can save myself some time here, let me put down the tier list for a second. Bard is B tier for anybody who was here earlier when I was showing Bard gameplay. But also for this reason, being that it's a job that has the least buttons in the entire game. I kid you not, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 buttons, or I guess 7 if you want to count your LB. But yeah, Bard's not looking too hot, mostly because you're a damage support, if that makes sense. Your purpose is to be a damage buff thingamajig, basically Scholar minus the Adlo spread thing. You burst with your silence into your Imperial Arrow, so you're a silence bot. And yeah, all your damage, by the way, is range based. So, excuse me, if you even think of going anywhere forward or close to your teammates, yeah, you're basically shooting yourself in the foot, because you're going to be dealing less damage. And Bard kind of needs to be around their teammates to give them the damage buff that comes with Apex. But you see the dilemma here, you see the problem, and I guess the main selling point, the only good thing with Bard here is the fact that you have this thing called Wardens that basically acts as a free purify to any target, and that target also gets increased healing if you successfully remove CC or status effect or whatever. Okay, the LB got a rework recently, like I think this season specifically, where now it's global. Before, your targets had to be in range to get the effect, and now it also did something with LB generation. Something with Bard LB changed, that I know, and it's in a better place than it was before. I would have put Bard C tier, but with this LB buff, it's B tier. I hope that is the most simplified explanation I could. And to go back to tier list here, yeah. So in any case, next on the list is Machinist. Machinist is S tier. Surprise, surprise. So let me show you why that is. So do I have a Machinist gun anywhere? If I sort this, right, it should sort this based on... Right, I have a Machinist gun right here. Why is Machinist S tier, you might be asking? So Machinist says I have Drill, I have Bio Blaster, I have Air Anchor, and I have Chainsaw. I'm going to explain what each of these does in detail, one by one. So Drill says 10k damage. We're going to assume we're not using Analyze, by the way, or Analysis. 10k damage through guard for free. Bioblaster's free dot. What is it? Air Anchor says free root, and then Chainsaw is just damage that is really only going to be used when you have Analyze. But the main thing I want to emphasize here is when you analyze or analysis each one, where analysis on drill says double the damage to 20k through guard or no guard. Bioblaster enhanced or with analysis says give a slow. I don't know if it damage increases. Let me correct myself before I make that mistake. No, it only just gives heavy, I think. If I'm reading this right. Whatever. You never want to analysis bio anyway. Very rarely do you want to analysis bio. Analysis air anchor stuns and does increase damage, I believe. Yeah. So it increases potency by 50%, so you're going to be doing like 12k. And then the main bread and butter, the main meme behind Machinist is Analysis Chainsaw, which says you execute your target. I mean, no, they changed this recently where now it's only like 90%, I think, of the target's health. 3% chance to deal damage, 95. But it's almost the same thing anyway. What target is going to be at exactly 95 or higher these days, right? Like, it's still kind of executing, and you're taking a huge gamble, right? So your only analysis, I don't know how you want to say analysis plural, analysis are going to be on drill and chainsaw. Very rarely do you want to use air anchor, maybe to secure a kill, right? If you have a burst target and you analysis air anchor, that's huge. And yeah, main selling point of Machinist as well as the sniper or the LB, guaranteed 36k. I don't think it's true damage, or it could be mitigated. Also wildfire, I mentioned earlier, you deal 3 attacks to a target, free 7k or 12k damage. It's 4k per hit, but it automatically detonates after 3 hits, so you're dealing 12k or 15k, however much it is. Bishop turret is huge, this thing. If you place it on yourself, you get a shield of 6k, I believe, or 4k. Shield is a shield regardless, and any target standing in it get damage increase. So this was something I was teaching somebody earlier, and something I plug in, I guess, now, is that you can macro. Yeah, let me explain this air anchor macro, or not air anchor, bishop turret macro. So my macro says you can bishop auto turret a target. You don't have to go out of your way and aim it like this or whatever, right? Like, this takes too much time. So instead you can macro it to place it wherever you want, like this. Right, so now it's gonna just play the battle theme until the turret is gone, but you see what I mean? Like, you don't have to aim it. And I think this is a huge game changer, not for just for Machinists, but for any job that has a targeting based ability like that. But that's basically Machinist in a nutshell, and why I think it should be S tier, right? So if you want to be a Machinist main, now is the perfect time, because I don't think it's going to get a nerf anytime soon. The only nerf that was most recent is to the chainsaw. So yeah, that's why Machinist is S tier. Next on the list is Dancer. This is where things start getting a little philosophical, a little debatable. But I'm going to say Dancer is in the B tier category. Maybe A tier in the hands of a right player, right? And this is where I'm going to start using the disclaimer of, oh, in the hands of the good player, or better than average, right? Because Dancer can do a number of things that really change the game, and I'll explain why. So if I pull up my Dancer set here, Dancer does 2 things. One, well, I can't do this unless I'm in game or in a party, but you can, what is known as Dancer partner your target, and anything that you do as Dancer here, which are your Starfall Dance, your Curling Waltz, and I think that's about it, get transferred over to that target. So you're a mini support in a way. But I think your main selling point is your burst with this, if I can show it on a target dummy. So you open with these two, and then you're basically gonna just waltz around, as you know the ability is called. But you have high burst for only like 2 buttons of work, and you can set this up as much as you want, you know, have a good time. And you can also spin to win, as I like to say. This gives you increasing stacks of damage for the more targets you hit, and also gives you a small bit of mitigation. So you want to use the spin in like checkpoints or choke points that require you to be like grouped up together, i.e. Clocktown, when you're in those like corners, the death corners that I like to mention earlier. But the main thing that Dancer has for it is in the LB, where it says turn off everybody's guard, just like Reaper's does, but instead targets are attracted to you rather than pulled away or repelled away. So inverse of Reaper LB. And now when you Dancer LB them, any damage that you deal to them while they're in that like trance extends the Dancer debuff, which is like, you know, like your character can't move. Or not move, but like take action. And honestly, I would go as far to say that it's S tier when it's executed or combo. Okay, so Dancer LB can also not only used for self purposes, but to combo out with like Dragoon, right? Like, so you want to set up a play, Dancer LB is perfect for that, because Dancer Dragoon immediately comes to mind as a comp idea for anybody who wants to do like light party stuff. Like, that's where essentially, you know, Dancer would shine, is in a team that can support it. And to somebody's question earlier about like, oh, Scholar, I think was the thing, like why isn't Scholar? Like it's very like team dependent. Like you need the team for it, right? So that's why ultimately in a solo queue environment, a lot of disclaimers are going to be thrown around here. So like in the hands of a good player and in the ideal scenario or in the perfect world, I'd say yeah, like I have it here, Dancer A tier. Otherwise, it could go B or even C tier at some points. You know what I mean? So, but for right now, I think I'm going to leave it as A tier. Moving along now is Black Mage. So Black Mage, immediate S tier. For those who were here earlier and saw my Black Mage gameplay, it's also very debatable, very philosophical idea as to why Black Mage is played one way or the other. If I can find my Black Mage weapon, that'd be great. Should be somewhere here. Oh, right here. So, Black Mage, why is it S tier? To keep things simple, short and sweet, high burst. Immediately, what comes to mind is that you do 16k with this thing, you get a shield. I guess increasing levels of damage with your fire and stuff like that. So, Fire Mage and Ice Mage is the greatest debate behind Black Mage. 99% of people will say Ice Mage is good, and while it is, I'm here to argue that Fire Mage might be better in certain scenarios just because the dot is super underestimated, super blank. I can't find the vocabulary word, but you get my point. And that debate aside though, the main thing that Black Mage has going for it is the thing I mentioned earlier, where it's probably one of the fastest LB generators in the game, where only takes about a minute of game time to get your LB up, and your LB says gives you a free 16k damage AoE, and you have I think 8 stacks, 7 stacks, some ridiculous amount of stacks of instant cast on your tier 3 spells, which would be Flare and Freeze, right? And these deal 12k respectively. So you're basically dealing 12k, 12k, 12k for free every minute. And Black Mage is just super strong right now. high burst, big damage, just like in PvE, and you're gonna have a great time, right? Like, and it's just so. Now, I think the one thing I want to emphasize too is like Black Mage is a lot of fun. I'm not gonna lie, like I miss playing Black Mage in a way, and I might start putting in more games on it, but it's just really strong right now. And as much as I would like to demonstrate why I think, oh well, I already did, but I mean in this very specific scenario with training dummies and stuff, it's just gonna take too long to show all the combos and stuff. In the future, you know, that now that I have like a YouTube and stuff like that, I might do like a separate video showcasing each job, strengths, pros and cons. For those who are familiar with Hera from AoE 2 Age of Empires, if any Age of Empires viewers are in the chat, he has like a series for each civilization called oh, so you want to play insert civilization name. Let's say like Cumans, for example. I might do something similar where it's like, oh, so you want to play Black Mage in PvP, and do a whole breakdown on that. But for the simplicity's sake, or for just time's sake, yeah, I've already explained everything, or showed at least one game's worth as to why in this tier list Black Mage is S tier. Okay, Summoner. Summoner is S tier. A lot of S tiers happening here. So as you can see, you know, a lot of things are strong right now. But let me go ahead and show you what's up with Summoner. So Summoner says, your main burst, and I'm a Summoner main at heart, so I'm gonna probably be a little bit more in depth with this one. But Summoner, high burst again, just like Black Mage. For those who saw my Black Mage gameplay, you saw that Summoner did more damage. The reason being is because when I get to summons and stuff, yeah, you're just gonna have a good time. You're gonna do some Crimsons, which says 8k into 12k, total 20k damage for free, AoE. The only downside is that it puts you out of position, right? Another selling point of Summoner, on a scale from 1 to 10 in utility, it's like a 6, or maybe a 7 utility, because you have damage, you have a shield called Radiant Aegis that says damage taken is reduced, and you have a barrier. You have a root with your thunderclap thing, I like to call from like shamans and WoW. You have a speed boost when you do this slipstream thing, right? So you see how I'm like running around as if I had sprint? This is how much I run with sprint. No sprint, with sprint. So this is huge sometimes when you want to get your teammate out of danger, and you know, you set that up on Crystal perfectly, and yeah, your teammates, sorry, are gonna get out quickly. But I think the main thing I want to emphasize with Summoner here, and once again, this is kind of philosophical, very debatable. 9 times out of, and I'm with this crowd, or with this group of people, 9 times out of 10 people are going to say Bahamut is better. Reason being is Bahamut says you summon him. Going back to my macro thing earlier, you can also do the macro thing as I showed earlier. But Bahamut says you summon him, I think you deal like 16k damage when you summon him, or 12k, I guess I'm going to go off this number here. 12k on top of another 12k, because you can use your LB again to deal like double flare, basically. And then he just stays stationary at one, or at whatever point you summon him. You're just going to start hitting targets like 4k this way, 4k that way, and you're just going to keep doing what I just did there. You know, very simplified version, right? Throughout his entire summon. So the other crowd, or other school of thought, says Phoenix is better, and this is going back to my rating of like a 6 or a 7 out of 10 for utility, because Summoner's Phoenix is very strong when you have like a 4v5 situation that you want to turn into a 5v5 asterisk. Asterisk meaning like possibly, maybe, in terms of team strength, assuming your teammates are at reasonable like skill level, you can easily turn a 4v5 into a 5v5 the minute you summon Phoenix, because Phoenix says your Ruin 3 becomes instant casts. They deal, I think, like 5k each, okay. The main thing though is that, remember how I said you can recast your summons again? The recast for Phoenix is this thing. Deals 6k dot to all targets, or 6k damage into a 3k dot, and then a 12k heal. Basically a Scholar LB, right? Like it's huge, and you can really sustain and mitigate a fight all throughout with just Phoenix. But 9 times out of 10, you're gonna want to be using Bahamut. Like, Phoenix is super niche use, super rare as to when you want to use it. But a lot of times people would still use Phoenix aggressively. They won't consider the defensive aspect and go right into the offense. So I hope that answers or puts emphasis on why, going back to the tier list, Summoner is S tier. To summarize, it's just big damage, huge, and lots of utility. I don't know how else to put it. So yeah, in any case, we're closing in on the last ranged DPS here, or the ranged magical. Red Mage. Red Mage says, oh well, Red Mage is S tier, but what does Red Mage say? Let's see here. Red Mage says, I have my black shift and my white shift right here. This is how you can change stances. Your black shift ideally is going to be your more aggressive one, but the main thing is that you're not even a caster. I'll be honest with you. Red Mage plays more like a melee caster, and by that I mean your main damage is going to be coming from your riposte, or riposte, however you want to pronounce it, which is a 3 damage thing. And for the second and third versions, look at the dot you're doing. You did like a 9k dot into a 6k dot. I didn't even debuff this target, and I did more than half of its HP in 1 GCD, or technically 3. And then the cherry on top is that after you do all 3 GCDs, you can throw an AoE into it. Red Mage is super bursty, and it's like it makes fights go from 0 to 100 if you can land the right. So then, where does Black Mage really shine? It's mostly in its Frazzle. This thing says 10% reduced healing and 10% increased damage. It's like a duality, right? So notice how instead of what was it, like 48%, now it's at 18%. Like, this is huge. I'm showing it, and I'm also emphasizing it through my voice. How powerful Red Mage and how underestimated it is. It's barely seen in Light Party or even solo queue. It's really underestimated. If somebody were to come up and ask me, hey Lelouch, like, what's an underplayed or something you want to see more of that is really underrated? Red Mage is definitely one of them. But the other tools that Red Mage has is this thing called Resolution. So on Black Stance or Black Shift, it's a root, and on White Shift, it's a silence. I think the silence is what you want to be using it more for. And yeah, as you heard the ding here, I guess the main cherry on top is the LB. Look how I 100 to 0 this target. Let's assume I'm like, doing everything. Not only did I deal all that target's damage, if I wanted to, I could just put him down to 50% too. Like, just big damage. Like, if I can summarize Red Mage in 1 or 2 words, big damage. And maybe on a scale from 1 to 10 in utility, it's like a 3. The silence and the Black Shift AoE. Oh, I didn't mention White Shift AoE. White Shift AoE is like super niche use. You only use White Shift AoE when you want to increase sustainability, right? Because it says 10% reduction in damage and 10% increased healing, right? Yeah. And never ever what is it? White Shift AoE. It's only gonna do 8k damage and 8k heal. That's nothing. You want a Black Shift AoE. That's Red Mage summarized, but ultimately, beautiful job. You're gonna have a good time on Red Mage. So Paladin. Paladin right now would be A+, meaning it would be S tier. Probably the best tank, but not beginner friendly. So if I can just summarize Paladin real fast. Just use this for now. We'll equip the shield, whatever shield I have. Really weird combination. In any case, oh, maybe I should equip my Jobstone too. Paladin, right? Super support. You're not going to be dealing damage as Paladin at all. This is your burst right here. You want to know what Paladin burst is? This is your burst. You're only doing 8k of damage every time. Because in reality, your job as Paladin is to keep your teammates alive. And you do that through this beautiful, magnificent thing called cover. Or Guardian in this case. Which lets you slide to your target, which is not my target. You can't do that to enemies, of course, right? It had to be your teammates. But when you have a teammate that you just don't want to make sure they don't die, cover them. I have a macro that would type something in chat like covering teammate or whatever, and it would also put this like triangle. So for any new people, please pay attention to this part. Your team, your Paladin, if you have one, will most likely put this symbol on you because they want to cover you, or they are covering you, right? So the minute you see this triangle on you, immediately elixir, because you're not going to be taking any damage anyway, and your elixir animation isn't going to cancel while you're covered. I think that's the main thing that a lot of people still don't know, is that when you get covered, just elixir. And then last but not least, you get this nice shield, this nice 12k negate damage and heal after shield, and also deals damage to nearby targets. Probably the most useful or beneficial thing that Paladin has. But honestly, yeah, Paladin's really strong. Easy to learn, hard to master, I think is perfectly summarizing Paladin's strength here. We're gonna skip Blue Mage because as much as I would love a Blue Mage Battle Royale, or Blue Mage to be in PvP, just can't be listed, right? So War, War is... okay. War is S tier now, it's more meta. Back then, I would say is A tier, maybe even B tier. Not C tier, B tier. But right now it's really strong, really A tier, really meta. Let me demonstrate why. So... oh, that's Reaper, sorry. This is my Warrior. So, Warrior says... I have a damage increase, I have Primal Rend, which is an 8k AoE, I have Orogeny, which is scaled based damage based on how much heal I have. So if I were to walk up to this target at full HP, I'm dealing 10k for free. And that target is also gonna be able to deal reduced damage. So to use the utility scale that I mentioned earlier, Warrior's utility scale is like a 5. It's right smack dab in the middle out of 10. Because your Blota is also probably one of the main things that secures kills for your team. You have a target that's running away, just pull them back in. Think of like Scorpion from Mortal Kombat. It's like, get over here, right? So you have a stun, you have a damage increase, you have a damage reduction, scaling based. You have Bloodwetting, which says... two things. One, you convert all your damage into healing, and you have a barrier. 10% of your HP, summarized, right? And I think the cherry on top to Warrior is the Guard Break. So Guard Break is huge on maps like C9, Guard Break is huge on maps like Clocktown, and not only that, but your abilities deal double damage, except your OGCDs. Okay, the only exception is Orogeny. Orogeny is going to stay base 10k, or base scaling HP, but now your Primal Rend is going to have a stun with 16k, huge. Your Onslaught stays the same, I think, with damage still. Bloodweighting, 8k, becomes 16k, and so you're going to heal, like, back to full. If you count 5 times 16 is what, like, saying this off the top of my head, but like 96, or, yeah. 88. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, so if I'm doing my math right, hopefully somebody can correct me. You know what? Hold on. I'm gonna pull up a calculator. How about that? 16 times 5 is 80. Okay, so I'm wrong. 80k heal immediately, right? And that's only under LB stance, by the way. If it was un-LB'd stance, it would be 40k. Still huge, but like, yeah. In summary, War, if I can summarize, it's just powerhouse, big damage. Like, those two words or phrases alone can summarize War in a nutshell. You know, I'm almost inclined to put War maybe A tier because I didn't mention War's downside, which is using health for its abilities, right? You use... Let's take a look at this, right? I used... How much for Orogeny? Like, what, 5 or 6k, right? It says 10% of my current HP. So 10% of 63k is what, like 6.3k? So immediately 6k. I use 10% here, which after both would be this, 51k. Right, so when a job has to use health as a resource, that's really bad. You don't want that. And that's why I think it belongs in the A tier category. It's just not going to work out at all. Right, so yeah, we're gonna move it down from S tier to A tier, just of that, because of that fact alone. And this is exactly why, and not even kidding, like Dark Knight is also A tier because of that reason too. If I can summarize Dark Knight, let's see. Dark Knight is probably the best beginner tank alongside Warrior. But at the same time, it's like shooting yourself in the foot, right? So if, hold on, let me stop combat here too. This is my only Dark Knight sword, I think. So, oh, close this. Dark Knight says, my only mitigation is Blackest Night. I have a healing reduction with Plunge, but my main damage comes from my Shadowbringer, which, look how much health I'm losing every time I use it, right? Like, it's so bad. But if you're able to recuperate in between every Darkest Night, or Shadowbringer, sorry, then you're okay. At least you get a Blood Spiller. At least you get a 1-2-3 GCD combo like your PvE that heals you on the third one. If you have all 5 targets, you can heal back to full with Quietus, at least, right? But you see what I mean? Like, Dark Knight, I'm almost inclined to even say it's B tier. But I'm giving it the A tier because the main thing that Dark Knight excels in is 2 things. One, the Salted Earth, it won't work here because they're stationary targets, but this would have pulled targets in, and then I can do a root. And also, while I'm in the circle, I get 20% damage reduction, which is huge, and I heal, basically. But not only that, my LB, saw like the actual Living Dead, like the PvE one. I don't die, basically. And those 2 reasons alone are what's carrying Dark Knight's major con, which is Shadowbringer spam, and how you only do damage with Shadowbringer and Bloodspiller. Shadowbringer, Bloodspiller. And yeah, I would like to sit down and lab Dark Knight one day, but it's just not my cup of tea, right? I don't want to like downplay any Dark Knight mains either, but it's just, how do you deal with this, right? Like, you're just putting yourself in so much danger for nothing, at least in my opinion, right? But if that TLDR's Dark Knight, I'm being very generous with the A tier, but in reality, I think it could be here too, right? But let's just say for argument's sake, it's A tier in the hands of the two conditions, or the two criteria, whatever term I used earlier. Hands of a good player and ideal scenario, right? Like, honestly, it's just A tier for those two reasons alone. Last tank on the list is Gunbreaker. Gunbreaker, back then, okay, I'm putting in A tier right now, but back then I would say it's like B tier. Probably the worst tank out of all of them. But right now, it got a buff to its Aurora, and I think it got a buff to its LB. Correct me if I'm wrong. But those two things alone just make it A tier. I'd go as far to say S tier in some cases, but not all. The some case, or the exception, would be if you have a Sage on your team, and here's why. So if I find my Gunblade, that'd be great, which would be this one. What does Gunbreaker do? It's a blue DPS. Don't even consider it a tank at all. The only time you consider it as a tank is when you junction Nebula. Let me pull up the utility scale here for a second. On a scale from 1 to 10, Gunbreaker is a 6, maybe a 5, split in the middle again, because your junction is Nebula for tank, Aurora for healer, and Blasting Zone for DPS. Very crazy debate here, but I think a good majority of Gunbreaker players, if there are any, would say you junction Nebula primarily for survivability, but if you want to play a more aggressive Gunbreaker, you can junction DPS for Blasting Zone, which is huge, because you can combo with your double down, which is this thing, 16k damage for free, or 12k. It would have been 16k with the Rough Divide, which is why I said 16k. But you do that, and very rarely would you do Aurora, even though Aurora just got buffed. Like, a lot of people want to switch the side of Aurora being the go-to. Very debatable, but that's the beauty of Gunbreaker, because you have so many options. The only downside, however, is that you're never guaranteed every junction. You're most likely going to get a 50-50 split between Nebula or Blasting Zone usage, right? Because you're never guaranteed a certain role or specific, basically a specific role in solo queue. In Light Party, same deal. And that's the downside of Gunbreaker, and that's where I would have said it's B tier back then, because had you had the ability to junction your teammates, would have been immediately A tier. I would have circumvented that problem. But you see the dilemma now? Like, you can't get rid of this problem because you're only able to junction enemies and not your teammates, if that makes sense. Other than that, yeah, your standard burst is this. You're gonna have a good time just spamming this, followed by double down, and your standard 1-2-3 combo is the same as always. But I think the main selling point of Gunbreaker here is the LB, which is kind of like a spin to win as well. Incremental damage increase per stack up to 5, and then your last one after you're done spinning is a stun, which would be this thing, Terminal Trigger. 12k stun, or 12k damage into a stun, which you would immediately double down to for a finishing 24k, or maybe higher because you had damage increase stacks on them. But other than that, right now Gunbreaker is also one of those jobs like, oh, what would you like to see more play of in either Light Party or solo queue? Gunbreaker. Yeah, really underplayed, really underutilized, and could definitely maybe use a buff in the regard or the aspect of, yeah, being able to junction your own teammates. That's the only thing it needs, and it's probably an S tier job. So we're going into the healers now. So S tier healer, excuse me, would be White Mage, right? So if I go to White Mage, and if I equip my Jobstone, White Mage is also in the category of least buttons for in the entire game. same thing as Bard. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So, White Mage is very simple, very simplified. Easiest job to learn, easiest job to, or on a scale from 1 to 10 difficulty, maybe like a 5 or a 6 in terms of difficulty master. But the main thing that you want to know about White Mage is the Miracle of Nature. This thing is the kill secure. You have a dash that protects nearby targets and turns your Cure 2 in an instacast Cure 3. Really huge, really big damage. Or not damage, but heals. Your Flatus is the big damage, AoE. So you have 3 damaging abilities, a major utility polymorph, a heal, 2 stacks of heal. Aquaville is huge. It says it's like Bard's thing that I showed earlier. It's a purify or CC removal. You have a purifier for your teammate, and if you successfully negate CC, double barrier from 8k to 16k, which is huge. But the main thing that White Mage has that I kind of was talking about earlier is that White Mage says, I generate my LB in 1 minute, Kamehameha, and free stun and free damage. Very simple, very efficient, and gets the job done basically. There's no point in time where I'd say White Mage is weak or anything. It's like beautiful, perfect starting healer to learn. Very simplified explanation here. I'm not gonna be biased. I'm not gonna, as much as I pains me to do this, Scholar just might be A tier, but some would argue it's B tier. I'm gonna go with the majority crowd here and probably say that Scholar might be B+, rounding upwards to A tier. Right? If there was a B+ category, I'd probably put Scholar there. But Scholar right now is A tier. It's the least played healer to my knowledge. I just showed you one Scholar game of what it's capable of, but for those who missed it, I'll go right back into it. So, Scholar says, I have a damage increaser that I can spread to nearby teammates with deployment tactics. I have a defensive buff that negates 10% damage, gives 24% movement speed, so as you can see I have sprint speed. This is with sprint on for 5 seconds, 6 seconds, whatever. But the main thing is enhanced version of my 2 abilities here, which are Adlo and Bio. Now enhanced Bio is the one you want to be doing the most. You very, very rarely, like I'm talking a 1 in 1,000, not chance, but 1 in 1,000 time opportunity to use enhanced Adlo. All enhanced Adlo does is increase the barrier potency. If it increased the damage potency of the increase, it'd be worth it, but in this case, no. So you only want a recitation or expedient into Bio like this, because here's the different levels of Bio. You can Adlo yourself into teammate spread, whatever. So recitation with Adlo would make Bio do 4860. No Adlo enhanced Bio would be 4500. Adlo with Bio would be what I'm about to do now, which is 3240, and then base Bio damage is 3k. So in summary, like, Scholar is on the 6 out of 10 scale for utility. You have a speed boost, damage reduction, damage increase, and survivability, or the main selling point of Scholar is its LB, which I've mentioned a couple times already, which is the Bard's like built-in Purify negation, or it's like Samurai's Purify negation, but to your whole team. So you negate 1 CC. You have XCOG. If you go below 30, I think, or something like that, free 8k heal, consolation, free 4k barrier with heal. Like, Scholar is very, very strong in the hands of a good player. And it's also very team reliant, which is why a good majority would say it's B tier rather than A tier. But I'm somewhere in between where I'd say it's like B plus, right? So if you're on one side of the fence or the other, you put it wherever you feel like it belongs. I think in the majority of cases though, and in the two conditions I set out, which were Hands of a Good Player and Ideal Scenario, A tier. And that's where I think I'm going to keep it for now. But other than that, like, it's super strong when it works. So what I can summarize it as. So coming in on the last one, or last three so far, Astrologen just might be A tier, maybe even S tier. It would be A plus, right? So rounding up would make it S tier. So let's see here. Astrologen is my least played healer in the entire game, both PvE and PvP. But what I do like it for, you have cards. Think of Yu-Gi-Oh! You draw your card, Monster Cardo, so Arrow, movement speed, Bowl is damage reduction. Arrow used to, by the way, generate LB like Bard LB does, but not anymore. I think they just changed it to decreasing movement speed. You have balance, which is just like the PvE one, damage increase. Can't fight you now, sorry. But I think the main thing is that Astro has this weird thing where it can be a damage dealer and a support, and it excels in both, right? On the utility scale, it's like a 9 out of 10. Crazy, right? Like, it's almost at the tier of a ninja, because you have the 3 different card abilities. You have a heal that scales based on target's health. The lower it is, the more it heals. And then last but not least, the main thing is that you can double cast a lot of things. So if I just healed right now, I can heal it again. If I just Malefic this target dummy, which by the way you never want to waste your double cast on, you can do that. And so on and so forth. You have Macrocosmos, huge AoE burst, 12k, and for any targets hit, 50% or 25% of the damage becomes Microcosmos, which would heal potency to anybody who was nearby when the Macrocosmos happened, I believe, is how it works. Main selling point, or the cherry on top, excuse me, is the LB. Says 30% damage increase to all teammates, 30% damage reduction to all enemies, and it goes down by 10% every 5 seconds. Huge, big damage. In fact, I would like to lab, or try out Astrologen more. I think it really is underrated, question mark, but super strong, and I think it definitely deserves its S tier spot, maybe borderline A tier, not B tier, excuse me, with Scholar here. Like, I'd say B plus, or I'm sorry, not B plus, A plus, going into S tier, within that range. Sage, I think Sage is A tier, perfectly A tier, like no higher, no less, right? Because Sage is one of those healers where it can work, but your only job or purpose is to stall the game. If I can summarize Sage in one word, is stall. So what does Sage do? It has an AoE heal, or I'm sorry, not heal, barrier, damage deal. It has a dot that does some things. I don't play much Sage, as you can see. It nullifies damage equivalent to a heal of 8k. It has a damage increase with the Toxicon thing. Phlegma. So it has a lot of AoE, a lot of small burst, right? But the main thing that I think Sage has going for it is that its LB is the biggest, number one thing. You've seen it before. Orange, yellowish looking cage thing, blue if it's on your team. Negates all damage for people who are not standing in the circle. For people who want to deal damage, well, they gotta walk into the circle, but at the cost of taking 8k damage. And yeah, so essentially Sage's job is to mitigate, stall. But where it's lacking, I think, to prevent it from getting S tier, is the fact that once your options are gone, like all of this is off cooldown, let's just say, right? Like I'm throwing all this away just to emphasize this point. What are you left with? You're just left with a 1, 2, 3. Your cooldowns for your major bursts are down, right? So this is going to take a while to get back up. And in the meantime, you're just going to be a dosis bot, as I like to say. Cardia, oh by the way, Cardia does the same exact thing as it does in PvE. But yeah, you know, like, it's really lacking, and once its burst is gone, it's gone. And it doesn't do much after until it gets its LB, right? Which is probably one of the slowest building LBs in the game too. So those two things alone prevent it from getting the S tier category that I mentioned earlier. But I think it sits at a nice A tier, just because of how strong its stalling or mitigation power is. If you combine a Sage with Paladin, you're in good hands, right? Like you're gonna have a good time. And then last but not least on this list is gonna be Monk, which I think is immediately S tier, and maybe even A tier in some regards. Here's why. So if I find my Monk weapons wherever they are, can anybody spot them? I think they might be on second row. Do I have Monk anywhere? I'll just use my, oh, so I don't have a Monk. Unfortunately, I don't have Monk weapons. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna buy one over here and the little shop or whatever. Give me like literally 20-30 seconds. But as I'm walking to the shop here and figuring out if I buy the right weapon, Disciple of War, I can't afford them, so we're gonna go here. Disciple of War weapons. Doesn't matter what we pick. Where is Pugilist? Here, we'll buy this. Doesn't matter. I just need it for explanation purposes. So we're gonna equip this. We're gonna be naked. Whatever. We're gonna equip our Jobstone. So basically, Monk is really strong because it's very button spammy, as you can see. You can have a nice good time. I think the only downside to Monk is that your GCD combo is all in one button. It's 7 buttons. 7 buttons to do one giant burst at the end. This can be increased with the Phoenix thing, which does damage, as you can see there. But you mainly want a Phoenix right here on the final one, because then you do 15k to all targets. Monk has nice sustain with ROE. ROE says if you take any damage, compile all that basically into a giant heal, plus a giant damage to all targets nearby, like this. Or its reply. You have a stun. You have this thing, which not many people know, but if you push a target back with Enlightenment and then followed by Meteor Drive, you're essentially guaranteeing the kill. You're executing, as I like to say, with Monk. But Monk is really strong. I'd say it's really high in the survivability department with just ROE alone. If you can master how to use your ROE, you can do crazy combos like that. That would just 100 to 0 target. And I can demonstrate this thing like that. Like, this is ideally how you would want to do it. And then you just guarantee Meteor Drive kills, excuse me. So, yeah, very simplified explanation. I would definitely go in depth in another video or in another time, but as a final point, this is what I would say is the ideal PvP tier list. Very opinionated, could definitely be subject to change, but for right now I think this is where I'd leave it. So yeah, with that said, I did say I was going to queue down here, or